Hey there, welcome to the Posit Data Science Hangout. I'm Libby Heron, and this is a recording of our weekly community call that happens every Thursday at 12 p.m. US Eastern Time. If you are not joining us live, you miss out on the amazing chat that's going on. So find the link in the description where you can add our call to your calendar and come hang out with the most supportive, friendly, and funny data community you'll ever experience. Can't wait to see you there. I am so excited to introduce our featured leader today. It's Lisa Elkin, Senior Principal Computational Toxicologist at Pfizer. Lisa, your title is a mouthful. Thank you for joining us. I would love it if you could introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. So I like to call myself a scientist turned data scientist. My background is in cell biology and biochemistry, and I spent about 20 years in the lab, most of that in the pharmaceutical industry, in drug discovery. For those of you in the industry, I was in high throughput screening and hit assessment, which basically is like screening millions of molecules against a potential drug target of interest, and then working with programs to work with similar molecules to try and find a hit that can become a lead. So that's a really, really data rich area within drug discovery. And throughout my time in the lab, I always really enjoyed working with data. I love doing big experiments where I could just like amass a huge quantity of data to sit with for a while. Um, and while I was in the lab, I had some really great opportunities to learn more data analytics as a part of my day job, both in training and working on projects. And then probably about 8 years ago, when my company closed their site, the site where I worked, I decided rather than relocate, I would reinvent myself as a data scientist. So that's what led me to my full-time role here at Pfizer. And now I build applications to make scientists' lives easier.
I love it. And tell us something that you like to do for fun outside of work.
For fun. I recently started Pilates this year on the
Ooh, that sounds
reformer, which I really
hard.
like. Yeah, I love it.
Oh
Um,
my gosh. Any other Pilates people in the chat? Let me know. I look at Pilates videos and feel fear. Uh,
it's
I used
it's
to.
amazing for your core. I didn't remember I had a core until this year.
Oh my goodness. Rachel says the hardest workout I've ever done. Yeah, I have a cousin who does Pilates and it's intense. All right. Well, I would love to give everybody a little bit of context building stuff for our questions so that we can ask Lisa amazing questions. And so I wanted to just throw some topics out, some topics that I know Lisa would be great to ask about. One is her career journey, just the non-traditional, non-data science stats background, ending up in full-time data science. Another one is growing inside of your role, whatever your role is right now, into a data science role, getting experience for data, how to advocate that to your boss, maybe how to find other places to get data into your role. That would be a great thing to talk with Lisa about. Another thing is being a tool builder. I love tools too. I am very tool focused. And so being a person who gets to build tools is very interesting to me, and I know to Lisa as well. There are also a couple of things that I know I would love to talk with Lisa about, like upskilling inside of an organization um, systematically, right? Like setting up processes and structures to help people upskill into data literacy and adding more data to their roles or becoming analysts. And then also knowing when to use AI and when to not use AI is another great topic that we have been talking about. We
Yeah.
talked about this with Jenny Bryan as well. All right, so let's get started with a couple of things here. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what toxicology is because you have this very long word in your title, and I don't understand
Yeah.
100% what toxicology is.
Yeah. So I work in preclinical drug safety in Pfizer. So this is basically early in drug discovery. we want to put the best molecules forward into the clinic. And so early in drug discovery, we're really trying to understand the potential safety liabilities. So it kind of starts very early. You pick a drug target and you try to understand, like, all right, if we want to hit this particular enzyme or activate something, we want to understand what the potential safety liabilities are of doing that. So it comes down to sort of like researching what's out there. And then we do things like screen against known potential liabilities. So, for example, we know certain small molecule drugs can affect ion channels in your heart. So we'll screen against those ion channels to make sure early on in a program, you're not putting forward a molecule that we know hits these ion channels, right? Things like that, all the way to, what happens in animal studies when you expose an animal to a particular molecule.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to like help my own brain, what are the data types that people like
Yeah.
your tool users are interfacing with?
Yeah, a lot of different data types. And that's one of the reasons I love my job so much is I get to flex all over the place to different types of data. In the early target space, it's literature mining. We actually just built a tool that has an AI component that goes and pulls information from various pieces of literature. It's early screening data is running assays on instrumentations that dump out a file, and you need to translate the numbers in that instrument output into some sort of potency determination. How potent is my compound against this particular, ion channel in your heart? All the way to, in animal studies, there's lots of different data to measure to see how the animals are responding to treatment.
Awesome. That is very, very helpful. I feel like I see and hear the word assay a lot in
Yes.
biostats, and I don't 100% know what an assay is either.
An
Um,
assay is like a test. It's sort of like you have like a teeny tiny little test tube. Now they're very small. You might think of a test tube as this big thing, but they can be teeny tiny little test tube. You put a compound in, you put something you're testing, like a cell or an enzyme or something like that. And then you watch to see what that compound does to the enzyme.
okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I have a great question that popped up in Slido from Noor. Noor, if you're available, could you ask that one live?
Hello, sure. I love
Hi.
asking things live. Ask also, hi, a fellow computationalist, because I am a computational biologist slash bioinformatician, actually trying to move into data science. So this is
Awesome.
actually tangentially related, but my question is, how do you think your science background benefits you as a data scientist, and how do you think it can disadvantage you slash be in conflict with data science
Yeah.
approaches? Because
Oh,
whenever
that's
everyone
awesome.
says scientists are like, oh, so data science, it's like, not exactly.
Right, right. For the longest time, when I got this role as a data scientist, I originally my title was data scientist and moved to computational scientist. I didn't want to put it in LinkedIn because I would get all sorts of requests. I'm like, well, I'm really a scientist. I don't want to call myself a data scientist yet because I'm not ready. Um, I think being a scientist and the job that I have is really an advantage. I think that's the strongest thing that I can bring to the table is that I understand what these scientists need. I know how they want to look at their data, what they, I was there once, 10, 15 years ago. I didn't know what a relational database was, right? So I can understand what is going to confuse them and what works with the way that they think. And because I know the way that they think, I can build tools that work that way, right? That aren't overwhelming, that think the way that they think. So I think that's what I bring to the table most. And my data science skills, I'm rapidly trying to sort of like bring up to speed. Um, yeah. So, and
I think
then,
that's a,
yeah,
oh, go ahead.
was that good? Yeah.
I think that's a great answer. I see Noor nodding. And this also sort of brings up the topic of imposter syndrome, right? Like we're
Yeah.
sort of dancing around
Yes.
this. And I don't really love the term imposter syndrome, but it's what everybody identifies as. I call it unnecessary feelings of inadequacy because you're a very smart and accomplished person, and yet you have this like thing eating at you, telling you that you're not adequate. I'm gonna put
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a
Yeah.
poll in the chat actually.
I think that was the second part
In
of
the
her
Slido, I
question
mean.
was sort of where are the disadvantages?
Yeah.
I don't know disadvantages, but I don't have the formal training that some of the data scientists have on my team. So I often feel, I'm not sure if I'm actually an imposter or I have imposter syndrome, but sometimes I feel like, wow, compared to these guys, what can I bring to the table? But I think everybody in our team brings something to the role. And, we have a mix of, most of the team has a background in biology, but some are much stronger in data science than others. And I think we all bring something to the table. I I guess I bring 20 years of experience in the lab in different roles. And, I'm hoping that that helps. And people are often very happy with what I give them. So in terms of tools, so I guess but I do have imposter syndrome.
But I'm not immune. I'm great,
I'm
but I'm
not
not immune.
immune. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that being a person who has had to use the tools, especially when the tools were not as good, makes you the best person to build the tools because
Yeah.
then you can advocate for the users in a way that somebody who's coming in and who's sort of superficially learning about end user processes could never, right?
Yeah.
Because they've never been in the trenches and suffering the way that you have
Right.
or frustrated. That was a great question, Nora. Thanks for asking. I am looking at our poll. Do you feel imposter syndrome or feeling of inadequacy? And the vast majority of us so far absolutely feel imposter syndrome, whether we have a background in stats and data or we don't have a background in stats or data. The majority of us are saying, yep, I still have imposter syndrome. So good to
That
know.
makes me feel better. Yeah.
Yep, we're not alone. And while we're at it, let's ask another question, which is, do you even have a traditional background? Like, where are we all? Are we traditional background people or non-traditional? I think I'm non-traditional. Lisa, you think so too, right?
Yeah.
Non-traditional.
Yeah.
I think,
I did not have uh the background. I mean, when I was in college, and I took a stats class where you had to go to the mainframe lab to do any programming. That's how, and so I sort of, like I said, I didn't know what a relational database was not
right.
too long ago.
There are probably people in the chat who do not know what mainframe is even.
Yeah, yeah. You had
Although
to go to a room with
yeah.
computers to.
I have worked for companies in the past decade who still operate some of their stuff on mainframe, so it's not
What
gone.
is
But
mainframe?
Lisa, do you want to explain mainframe a
Oh,
little bit? Actually, this might be
all I know is that we didn't really have personal computer. I mean, we just had personal computers, like where you stick one of those floppy disks into the thing in order to, right? There wasn't coding without going somewhere that had the compute power to
right. It's
support
like an
that.
enormous computer in a centralized location that everyone needs to go to in order to access or operate. So not exactly as a supercomputer, but computers also had to be a lot bigger back then than they do now. Computers can be a lot smaller. Our compute has gotten bigger and smaller at the
Yeah,
same time,
yeah,
which means that 20 or 30 years ago, it was huge and a lot slower. There are probably going to be some mainframe descriptions that are better than mine in the chat right now. So hopefully somebody will walk us through that in the chat. Um, Thank you, thank you, thank you. And it looks like our poll on are you traditional or non-traditional? More non-traditional than traditional. And I'm considering myself
great.
non-traditional, even though I have 2 degrees that are data focused. I didn't get to do that until I was in my 30s. So definitely a winding path. All right, let's head over to our questions because I see that Dami asked one about Shiny apps. Dami, would you be available to ask that live?
Of course.
Hey, Dami.
Hi,
Hey.
Dami.
Hi.
Hi Lisa. I know you build a lot of shiny apps for your work, and I was just wondering what kind of like audience do you build it for, and what is your workflow, like your thought process when building one?
Yeah. So mostly for scientists, but different kinds of scientists. So like some of the scientists, like in vitro scientists who work with assays in test tube, they're used to a lot of data. They tend to have to do some data analysis themselves. Um, so that's kind of like one person that I work with, they're pretty data savvy, but they don't know how to build an application that's going to sort of automate analysis for them. Um, and then, and in that case, those apps that I've built, I rely heavily on my experience as a scientist and what are the steps that I use to analyze that data? And what do they want to see? So I think about it in terms of a workflow. Um, some of the apps that I build, I'm learning to build modular shiny apps. I am still learning, but I kind of like that approach because I can kind of pick and choose different modules depending on the situation. I can reuse modules potentially. You know, a lot of the planning just happens in my head. I know you should sort of like write things down and map things out in terms of, um, what you want to do. So far, sometimes I keep that in my head, and occasionally I have mapped data flows though. Like, and I don't use anything fancy. I'll like grab a PowerPoint and sort of like, all right, well, where are my data sources? Where are they coming from? What are the steps in the data transformations that I need to do? Sometimes I do that just to explain what I'm trying to do to, other people, other technical users. Sometimes we've collaborated with outside vendors on particular projects. And in that case, that really helps a lot, is sort of just mapping out the data flow.
Yeah. Anybody else pencil and paper, their first step to anything? That's me, mapping out everything
Yeah, I
in a
do a lot of
notebook.
scribbles.
Yes,
I
I
tend
see
to
some other people
doodle.
say, yep.
I have aspirations to keep a really nice notebook, and I tend to just do a lot on scrap paper and
Hey, I
doodle at
think,
the same
yeah,
time.
Marlene is holding her notebook up. I'm like, yeah, let me just hold my pile of scribbled stickies
Yeah,
up for
yeah,
you because
okay.
I can't operate without them. Great question, Dami. Thank you for asking. And let's head over to Slido and find another question. I see one from Cecilia, and it's got an asterisk next to it. That means, hey, Libby, read this for me. So I will read from Cecilia Bartoli. What made you decide to switch to industry? What were the bottlenecks in your understanding between academia and
Yeah,
industry?
yeah. Okay, so this was a long time ago. But when I was in my probably second year of my postdoc, um, I always thought that I would go into academia, that I would be a professor somewhere. My mother was a professor. That's the life that I knew. But I realized I would kind of have to move all over the country in order to go where the jobs were. Um, and so at the same time, there was sort of a biotech boom out in New Haven, Connecticut, near Yale. And there was a professor who was starting up a biotech. And I joined that, just thinking, well, I'll see what it's like. In retrospect, over the last 20 years, I realized, wow, I am actually much more suited to industry than academia. First, because like I really like variety. I get bored. Like there are people I postdoc with who still study the same molecules that they studied 20 years ago. I'm like, I can't believe that. I just don't have, maybe I don't have the attention span. I think I tend to be like a jack of all trades rather than a master of anything. Um, so, and I find that in the pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of different variety. There's the ability to move around. It's you're very goal focused. It's very practical. And I feel like that suits me. And I'm also very process oriented, just like in building tools. It's sort of like, how are you doing this process? Is it efficient? Are you walking back and forth across the lab? Do you have to transfer a USB stick from one computer to the other? Are you copying and pasting into Excel? That all sort of like, for some reason, that suits me the way that I think. So, and my sort of drive to fix broken processes. So that's where
very
for me.
fair.
So the question, how do you what are the gaps? Because I feel like because I went into a small biotech company, I kind of learned on the job. What? You have to get used to a lot of meetings. But that didn't happen right away. That wasn't at biotech. That was mostly pharma. And carving out time for yourself to think and to continue to learn. We talked about this a little bit, Libby, is continuing to grow and upskill while you are doing your day job.
Yeah.
And that has really helped me get where I am, even moving from the lab to data science. Is like first, I love learning. I'm not happy if I'm not learning, basically. But carving out that time can sometimes be hard. I had some really great opportunities, both at the last company I worked with, Bristol Myers Squibb, and this company at Pfizer, in joining programs that were enterprise-wide programs for learning. So when I was at Bristol Myers Squibb and I was still working in the lab, I had the opportunity to work I guess it's like work with a group called the Analytics Exchange, which was basically like a program you could apply to, where you would learn data science skills but also work on projects. So people from across the company, from commercial to clinical to manufacturing, would submit little projects, like little analytics projects a challenge that they had. And basically different teams on this analytics exchange could work on those projects and learn by doing. And that was my real entry point into sort of like into data science. So as a part of that project, your manager had to approve your participation in the analytics exchange and carve out 20% of your time to do that. You're not always that lucky. At Pfizer, we have something similar. There's a large scale enterprise-wide program, and there's also a smaller scale program where I really learned beyond what I had done previously. It sort of didn't stick the first couple of times because I didn't have a project to apply it to. And in my in my current department, we have computational sciences community, where we invite people from across the department who want to upskill in data to work on mini projects for a half a year at a time, where they're asked to do the coding. So they'll learn something, like the first project's maybe just like learn R a little bit and make a tiny little reproducible analysis or something. And then there'll be other projects where you're an apprentice, and then eventually the apprentices become mentors for the next wave.
And I feel like you said in some of these, you got to practice project management as well. So if you were not a data scientist type, you were like, I kind of want to go try managing a project. You could do that in these types of programs. I just put a thing in Slido, a poll in Slido, asking if anybody has something like this at their company, an analytics exchange type of program. And 87% said no. So if they wanted to propose this to leadership, like, hey, could we do this? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I think what we've done on a small scale in my department, I mean, we have 10 people in our computation. Maybe that's a lot of computational toxicologists, but we have a department of like 400 people, 500 people. And we proposed this growth gig opportunity by going to management and explaining, like, we have so much work as a computational group, we can't get to everything, right? And there are things that our leadership really wants us to do, like spearhead AI initiatives, things like that. Well, if we're building tiny little dashboard apps and helping people with simple analyses, we can't do everything. And so one of the things, there are people, I'm sure all of you know as well, that there are people who are technically savvy, but maybe just haven't had the background in data science. I was one of them. So this allows people to bring their own problems to the computational community and say, hey, here's a little project that I've been working on. Can you help me? We help them build their little app or whatever, and they are upskilled now so that they do their own little projects. And so to management, one of the biggest justifications for doing something like this is you upskill your entire department, or those who want to grow in the data science area, and we can do more without hiring more computational science. You don't necessarily need someone who does predictive modeling to build a small dashboard, right, app that is based on a single document or something like that. So I think that's the strongest argument
I think that's
for it.
great. I think a lot of the, have you ever heard the phrase, oh, what if I upskill my team and then they leave? And the
Yeah.
response being, what if you don't upskill them and
Yeah.
they stay?
Yeah, yeah, right. I mean, there are plenty of pockets where you have people wasting so much time doing things because they don't know any other way, and they don't have time copying and pasting um, Excel, or copying data that exists in a database out of a PDF printout, where they'll spend hours and then add hours of QC on top of it because someone copied and pasted. And you're the entire department, by tackling these process challenges, creates more room for innovation,
Yeah.
because maybe you don't need 10 people for QC. Maybe you need 5 people for QC tests, and then you have 5 new roles that you can move over to something innovative, building, novel assays to avoid having to use animals in preclinical studies, things like that, right? So I think it's a benefit. I mean, I love working for this department at Pfizer. They understand that concept entirely. So I'm very lucky.
I love it. Well, I have some other questions about Pfizer for you, but let's hop over
Yeah.
to Slido first. And I saw that Inger had asked with an asterisk, so I'll ask it, something that an anonymous question also asked. And it's just, what tools or systems do you use for sharing, disseminating, or publishing the apps that you build? The anonymous question was, what are your tools that you use on a daily basis? So let's have
Yep.
a little tool chat.
Yep, sure. So now I use R and Shiny entirely. There are other people on my team who are Python programmers. There's a couple Python programmers as well. And Pfizer, we're lucky that our department doesn't really have to think too much about it, because there's an enterprise-wide group at Pfizer that takes care of basically standing up the platform, Posit Workbench platforms, RStudio Connect for publishing our Shiny apps too, things like that, where we don't have to worry so much about that because we have the support from our digital organization on that front. As far as tools go, I did not start my data analytics journey in R. I actually started when I was in the lab using a tool called Spotfire, which I don't know if people have heard of or not. It's a low code tool for data analysis and visualization. you might have heard of Tableau. Spotfire is like a souped up Tableau. You can do more with Spotfire than you can with Tableau, in my opinion. You could code, you can do a little Python, a little R inside Spotfire, but it has kind of standard visualizations, things like that. You can do data transformations and everything. And that was a great entry for me. I don't think you necessarily have to start there, but it was a great entry for me to understand a little bit about how a SQL query works, or how you do joins, or, the things that you need to kind of keep in mind as you're doing data transformations. So that was really helpful for me. And that's actually why I was hired at Pfizer, because I knew Spotfire. And the initial group that I joined within drug safety was looking for Spotfire developers. And
Interesting.
then while I was here, so there was like a data operations group and there was a computational group. And I saw the computational group. I'm like, oh my God, those guys are scientists. They know programming. I wanna do that. And they happen to have this growth gig thing, which
Growth gig.
yeah. So that's what it's like, sort of like Pfizer's version of the analytics exchange. It's more on an individual group basis where you post a growth gig, and if people are interested, they can apply for the growth gig, and then you work with your manager and the growth gig manager to determine how much of your time you're going to spend on the growth gig.
I like this. I
Yeah.
think we're all going to go out and ask
Yeah.
other departments if we can do growth gigs now.
Yes. It's sort of
I-
like a tiny little sabbatical while you're still doing your day job.
Yeah, just carve out a little chunk of time. I
Yeah.
put a link to what I think is Spotfire in the chat if anybody wants to go check it out.
Spotfire. Yep.
Thank you, Inga and Anonymous Asker, for great questions. Edward Leland had a couple of questions in there, actually. I will see if Edward is around to unmute.
Hello.
And hey,
Hi.
would you like to ask one of your questions? They're quite long, so if you could pick
Yeah, sorry,
a
I'm a
single
wordies.
a single question, thank you.
I'm a wordy person, so I think I'll go with the most upvoted one. So you work in an industry where like the direct results of your work have like a pretty direct effect on like people's health and life. First of all, how much oversight do you have on the results of your analysis? And do you ever get stuck in skeptic paralysis, like triple checking your stuff, being like, oh my
Yeah.
God, if I've done it, is someone gonna die? Or is that just like me imagining crazy
Yeah,
stuff?
so I think the thing is, you can imagine it's like a giant machine with a lot of different gears, right? And there's a huge amount of time something takes to get through the pipeline, from sort of like, hey, I have this idea of what could be a good drug target, to, submitting it's called an IND to say we're going to do a clinical trial with this molecule. And so, it's nice, right, that your work has such meaning, but it takes a village to make this sort of thing happen. Yes, there is a lot of oversight in terms of the QC of data that goes into regulatory submissions and things like that. But I don't know, in some ways that's sort of I don't love documentation, but it is sort of nice to be able to take the time to document how you're doing a process, to validating or qualifying that your analysis is correct, right? There's sort of like, there's a piece to that where a lot of what we do, we have to follow this sort of process where we've kind of verified on, multiple different test cases with different analysis tools that we're getting the same answer, basically. That's part of how we kind of like control for that. There is a lot of oversight. In some ways it's nice in that, especially something like code review, which is, in discovery research, we don't do it a whole lot, but the later you get, the closer you get towards the clinic, there's much more, review of your code. It can make you a better coder too. So I think Maybe that's just a life that I've always lived, but
I think that covers it. Thank you, Edward, for asking a great question. All right, let's head to Slido. There's so many interesting conversations that are happening in the chat right now. And Cecilia had asked, do you have podcast recommendations? So I thought I would throw that out there because we are all answering it in the chat right now. Lisa, do you have any?
Yeah. Let's see. I did have a bunch. I was listening to one very good one on AI.
And they don't
What?
have to be data related. They
Yeah.
can be
Oh,
anything.
gosh, there's so many. I love Cautionary Tales, is one podcast. It's basically a podcast that he will tell a story about some disaster that has happened, like, you know, a ship running aground or a plane crashing or some corporate disaster. And then he'll sort of dissect how that happened, how that got to that point. Like, what are all the sort of like the the things that happen and what are the human factors that went into that? And then what lessons can we learn from that? That's a great one. Similar vein, pilot debrief, plane crashes.
You are into the plane crashes.
But what happened that led up to that, and sort of like what are the factors that went into that? I guess that's the theme.
The theme here is also like problem solving and mystery solving.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a very data science thing. All right. Well,
AI chat. I have to add that one. AI
okay,
chat.
I'll add that one as well.
ChatGPT, AI news, artificial intelligence, Jaden Schaefer, Jaeden Schaffer. That's a good one. He's really young. I get a lot of good stuff out of that.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for asking, Cecilia. We had with so many recommendations in the chat. So everybody go
good.
Take a look. And by the way, you can save the chat at the end. Just click the 3 dots in the top right of your chat box. Arsenis had a question in Slido. I will highlight it for everybody so they can see it at the top of the Slido. And Arsenis, if you're available to ask that, that'd be great.
Cool. Thanks, Libby. And thank you, Lisa, for joining us today.
Sure.
You talked about something earlier today that really struck a chord with me, which is like you always want to be learning. If you're not learning, you're not happy.
Yeah.
I've said that many times myself to managers. And my question to you is, do you think that there's an easy way, a neat way for organizations to resolve the kind of the tension between allowing employees the space to learn and kind of be creative and do all that kind of stuff and be productive? Like that, you know, those things are in tension because there's only so many hours in the day.
Yep. I mean, I have been very lucky because at both Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer, there have been these larger initiatives, right? That you have to kind of recognize at the management, the senior leadership level, that these kinds of things are important for you know, competing for other employees. But I think one of the biggest things right now is every senior leader wants us to do more with AI. It's like, well, then upskill your people because, you know, it's like there's only so many out there. You know, you can do a lot if you train people. You know, I won't say that, like, when I'm learning, every person that I know who's been in one of these growth gigs or analytics exchange who has been really successful has learned outside of normal working hours. For me, that's just part of like who I am and what I do for fun. But you know, I don't have young children anymore. And so, you know, I imagine it's harder for a lot of people to carve out that time on the weekend or at nights or whatever. And so I mean, I think the biggest thing is you can try grassroots, sort of like within your own department, to even spin up one of these kind of things where, you you've got these little groups that work on small projects together. That was a great way to do it. Or even like a couple lunch and learns, maybe a lunch and learn series is good. We have done at Pfizer, there's also sort of, I didn't mention it, I meant to, there's an enterprise-wide R community. We have R Hangouts. Just once a month, we do exactly what this is. So Mike Smith, who heads the sort of the R initiative, is across all of Pfizer, has brought a small team of people together to start these initiatives. So some of them is like, if you don't have this, maybe try to start something. Maybe start small. But if people see that you're successful, you bring it as a use case in front of, a larger group and say, hey, this is what we did in our small department. And now, we have 20 people who can, do this more advanced analytics work instead of just
Yeah,
3. Yeah.
I agree. And Rachel had a good follow-on to that. Rachel, did you want to unmute and ask? I will highlight Rachel's question in Slido.
I love that Pfizer has their own internal data science hangouts. I think that is so cool. And I was just wondering, because a lot of people will ask me about starting their own community within their company. And because I'm not doing it within Posit, sometimes I worry I don't have the best advice for them. So I was wondering, what advice would you give to somebody that's just starting a brand new community? What has been most useful for Pfizer?
Yeah. Let's think. Well, I mean, it's interesting because I do think starting small really worked. It makes you very agile to do whatever it is you want. It can be a sort of like a casual lunch thing, but when you want to sort of scale up, you know, getting people engaged sometimes is hard. I think that's the hardest thing, is that we have all have day jobs, right? So it's very hard to devote the time. So you need a few passionate individuals, right? Who are just like, yeah, I totally want to do this for fun. And then kind of bring people along and understand that some people will engage for a couple of months and then they'll go away and then they'll come back when their, work has sort of dropped down, the workload has dropped down a bit. And that's okay. And that you kind of continue to repeat things, I think. So it's like, as we get more and more R users at Pfizer, we continue to have these, every once in a while we'll have a getting started session so that people don't feel so overwhelmed. So, and it's also about building a support system that grows. So like we were talking about with Analytics Exchange, where you have apprentices who become mentors. So that same thing happens with our community at Pfizer, where, we might take, for example, like a Posit Academy course. Well, the people who go through that course can become mentors for the next time. So you're sort of like what is that, like a pyramid scheme, creating a pyramid scheme of mentors. And it's nice to have, I mean, just like that, we modeled this. I shouldn't say we, I did not create this, our community. In fact, I took over from Natalia, who left Pfizer for another awesome job. But Natalia, she may be on here. She was great. She's like you guys, just totally engaging, right? It helps to have someone who can really engage the audience and have fun, like the chat, right? Like, it brings a human aspect to something. Even if you're like, 150 people on a chat, you feel like you start to get to know people.
I was just laughing. I was on mute. I'm glad I was on mute because I was laughing as you were saying, Posit Academy is a pyramid scheme. It's not a pyramid scheme, I promise.
Oh God, I didn't mean it like that. No, I meant in a good way.
But in a good way. Yeah, you
Posit Academy was fantastic for me because I always felt like I was missing something. I learned a lot through Posit Academy, but like I never had formal training. So Mike was kind enough to kind of like find me a spot on Posit Academy. I loved it. The teachers are so good and
it's
patient.
great that you mentioned the apprentice mentors, though, because I learn the most when I am helping other people learn, when I am teaching.
Yeah.
So like if I come to a course or a section that I need to teach and I know nothing about it, I will learn more from that experience than I would if I took the course on it, right? Like you need to be able to explain things. So the ability to do that for later cohorts, I think, is just amazing with Posit Academy.
And I mean, the nice thing about Posit, you watch what happens during the course of your team's journey from the first class in Posit Academy to the last. First class, everyone's quiet. By the last class, your mentor, your Posit mentor, it doesn't have to say much because you're helping each other. And she's just sitting back, or he's just sitting back and watching you and going, this is what I did. I got them to the point where they troubleshoot on their own without me. And it's a great
Yeah.
thing
I
to
think that
watch happen.
that's a little bit of the advice of like, how do you start the internal community? Working together
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
a fantastic thing. Doing a little side project together, something where you can have some back and forth. Thank you for the great questions, Rachel and others. We have about 7 minutes left, and I want to see if I can do some lightning round, quick questions for some answers that I've seen in the Slido. So one is, any resources for learning modular Shiny apps or tool building in general? Because Arsenis asked that as well, I think.
I did read the Shiny book. You could probably put a link to that. We did a book club at Pfizer on
Mastering
that.
Shiny, probably.
Yeah, Mastering Shiny, yes. That was useful. I opened a lot of GitHub repos to watch how people were doing it.
Yeah.
And that helped. I also love following Rachel and Libby on LinkedIn because you guys are constantly posting things. I'm like, oh, I got to check that out. So LinkedIn is a great place to, I used to do like follow people on Twitter, our users on Twitter, but now I just go to LinkedIn and half the time I find some great articles there.
I love it. I'm going to put a YouTube video in the chat as well from Jenny Bryan.
Yes.
This video is called Let Me GitHub Search That For You.
Yes. And then she also has one, Code Smells and Feels, that I absolutely love that talk.
Oh, somebody go
YouTube
find
is great.
Code Smells and Feels and stick that in the chat for me, okay? All right, great. Lightning round question. Let's do one more. Let's see. Marlene had asked about career trajectory, and somebody else had asked about growing as an IC. So I would love to end with some career advice questions and combine those two together. So Suraj's question was, what is the the career progression like as a data scientist? Is it possible for you to remain an individual contributor, like a doer, and still grow in your career?
Yes. And I feel like in my older age, I have finally come to the conclusion, much like if you watch the Data Science Hangout with Jenny Bryan recently, she said, I realize I am an individual contributor. That is who that's where I operate best. And I'm finally like accepting that of myself. I have managed people in the past in a lab. I had a lab. I'm really happy where I am as an individual contributor. And I've kind of like come to that conclusion, the same that I think Jenny Bryan's my hero.
Same.
Yeah, and to listen to what she had to say, because it was such a relief to hear like someone that amazing say it's okay to be an individual contributor. I would say like in a lot of the organizations that I've been in lately, there's this thing like where they're flattening out the organization, less hierarchical structure, and so you can remain an individual contributor and grow into like a senior fellow or senior principal data science. I'm sort of like middle, right?